Okay, this video is going to cover factors and factorization. What we're going to do, the instructions ask us to list all positive factors of each. So what we want to do is see if these numbers are divisible by certain numbers. So let's start with number 1 for 30. So we want to check for 1. So 1 is going to go into it for sure. 1's going to go into all of these. Let's check for 2. So the rule for 2 is if it ends in a 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8, or if it's an even number, then 2 goes into the number. So we're going to go ahead and put 2 for this one. Number 3, or checking for 3. Does 3 go into 30, or is 30 divisible by 3? So the rule for 3 is you add up the digits of the number, and if the sum of those digits is a multiple of 3, then 3 goes into that number. So let's take the 3 plus the 0. When we add those up, we get 3. 3 does go into 3, so 3 is a factor of 30. 4. The rule for 4 is if the last two digits of the number go into 4, or 4 goes into the last two digits of the number, then 4 is a factor of that number. So let's go ahead and do long division. 30 divided by 4. 4 goes into 30 7 times. 7 times 4 gives us 28. Subtract those, we end up getting 2. Bring down the decimal, or put up the decimal, bring down the 0. 4 goes into 25 times. 5 times 4 is 20. We subtract those, we get 0. Even though we ended in the 0, that doesn't mean that 4 goes into 30 because we have extra, a remainder. That 0.5 is the remainder. So 4 does not go into 30 evenly, so 30 is not divisible by 4. So we can go ahead and skip that one. Alright, let's check for 5. Does 5 go into 30? Because the 30 ends in a 0, it does. So the rule for 5 is if the number ends in a 0 or a 5, then 5 does go into the number. So we can go ahead and put 5. Let's check for 6. So the rule for 6 is if 2 and 3 both go into the number, then 6 goes into the number. Because we checked already for the 2 and the 3, and they both go into it, then 6 also goes into it. The rule for 7 is, there really isn't a rule for 7, you just have to do the long division. So let's go ahead and do 30 divided by 7. 7 goes into 30 4 times. 4 times 7 gives us 28. Subtract those, we get a 2. Put the decimal, bring up the decimal, bring down a 0. 7 goes into 22 times. You can already see that 7 is not going to go into it because we're going to have a remainder, so we don't have to continue. 7 does not go into it. So let's check for 8. The rule for 8 is if the last 3 digits of the number goes into 8, then 8 goes into that number. So we can do long division on this one again. 30 divided by 8. 8 goes into 30 3 times. 3 times 8 is 24. Subtract those, we get a 6. We're already going to have a decimal or a remainder, so we know 8 does not go into it, so we can go ahead and skip 8. Check for 9. 9 is similar to 3 where you add the digits up, and if 9 goes into the sum of the digits, then 9 goes into the number. Well, we already added the digits for 3. When we did 3 plus 0, we ended up getting 3. Because 9 does not go into 3 evenly, 9 does not go into 30. So let's check for 10. Because the 30 ends in a 0, that's the rule for 10s. If the number ends in a 0, 10 is divisible by that number. So we can already put 10 for this one. We can check for 11. Dividing by 30, or 30 divided by 11. 11 goes into 32 times. We end up getting 22. We're going to have a decimal. We are going to have a remainder, so we don't have to check any further. 11 does not go into 30. Check for 12. 12 divided by 30. 12 goes into 32 times, gives us 24. Subtract those, we end up getting 6. We're going to have a decimal already, so we know that 12 does not go into it. We can check 13 as well. So let's check 13. 30 divided by 13. 13 goes into 32 times. 2 times 13 gives us 26. Subtract those, we get a 4. We're going to have to bring down a decimal. Again, it doesn't go into it because we're going to have a remainder. We can check 14. I'm going to tell you you're going to do the same thing. 14 is not going to go into it. Check for 15. So 15 divided by 30, or 30 divided by 15. 15 goes into 30 2 times. 2 times 15 is 30. Subtract those, we get 0. So 15 is a factor of 30. It goes into it twice, so we can write 15 for this. Okay, number 2. Checking for the number 1, we already know 1 is going to go into it. Check for 2. Because 22 ends in a 2, we know that 2 goes into it because it's an even number. Checking for 3, 2 plus 2. Again, we add the digits up, we get 4. 3 does not go into 4 evenly, so 3 is not a factor of 22. We can check for 4. Again, if the last 2 digits are divisible by 4, then 4 is divisible by the number. So we can do, again, long division. 4 goes into 22 5 times. 5 times 4 gives us 20 with a remainder of 2. So we already know that 4 does not go into it because there is a remainder. We can check for 5. Because the number doesn't end in 0 or 5, the number is not divisible by 5. So we can skip 5. We can check for 6 now. Because 2 goes into it but 3 does not go into it, 6 therefore does not go into it. So we can skip 6. And let's check for 7. So what we want to do is do the long division again. So 22 divided by 7. 7 goes into 22 3 times. 3 times 7 is 21. Subtracting those, we get 1 left over, which we can't have any remainders, so 7 is not a factor of 22. So let's check for 8. Do the long division again. I'm going to tell you 8 does not go into it. We can check for 9. Again, we'll add the digits up. 2 plus 2 is 4. Because 9 does not go into 4, 9 does not go into 22. Let's check for 10. Because 22 does not end in a 0 or a... Just because it doesn't end in a 0 means 10 does not go into it, so we can skip 10. Let's check for 11. 11 divided by 22. 11 goes into 22 2 times. 2 times 11 is 22. Subtract those, we get a 0 remainder. So 11 is also a factor of 22. And I'm going to stop here because it is really repetitive. It's the same concept, just going through the numbers. You know, if you look at the last video, there's rules for the numbers 2 through 9 and 2 through 10. I'm sorry. So you're going to do that, but if you want to check anything above that, you're just going to have to do the long division. So this video is really going to be really short, but this one's on factors and factorization.